They called it a joke when my sister destroyed my daughter's birthday. They called me too sensitive as my child sobbed into my arms. But when my father slammed his wedding ring on the table, the joke was over. What he revealed wasn't just a secret. It was a key that unlocked a lifetime of lies. Please stay with me as I tell you my story, and don't forget to support our channel by subscribing, liking, and sharing it with your loved ones. That morning, I woke up feeling hopeful. Harper had turned 7, and I wanted this day to be perfect. The backyard was decorated with pink balloons, a banner with her name, and a table full of cupcakes she helped me bake. I had even invited my sister, Jillian, though a part of me feared she would ruin things like she always did. But I convinced myself people change. I told myself she'd at least behave for her niece. For the first hour, everything was fine. Harper laughed as she opened her presents, her eyes shining with joy. Then Jillian stood up, pretending to be playful, and said she had a special surprise. Before I could stop her, she grabbed Harper's new dollhouse and smashed it against the table. The room went silent. The sound of breaking plastic echoed in my chest. Harper started crying, clutching the pieces. Jillian laughed and said, "Oh, come on, it's just a joke." My mother, Diane, rushed to Jillian's side and said, "She's just playing around, Alara. Don't make a scene." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My daughter was crying, her gifts were ruined, and everyone was pretending it was harmless fun. When I spoke up, Diane snapped, "You've always been dramatic. Let it go." The guests shifted uncomfortably, but no one defended me. It felt like every nightmare from my childhood was happening again, only now my little girl was living it too. Then my father, Warren, who had been quiet the entire time, suddenly stood. He took off his wedding ring and slammed it onto the table so hard it rattled the glasses. "Enough," he said. His voice was sharp, shaking with anger. "You all want to know the truth? Jillian's been destroying Alara's life for years, and we've let her." The room froze. He looked at me, guilt written all over his face. Then he turned to everyone and revealed everything. How Jillian had stolen my college acceptance letter years ago, how she spread lies to my friends, how every setback I'd faced had Jillian's fingerprints on it. Diane tried to interrupt, but he stopped her. "You knew," he said. "You always knew and called it peacekeeping." The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. My sister looked away, suddenly silent. My mother started crying, begging him to stop, but my father didn't. He turned to her and said, "You can leave with me now or stay with her. Choose." Diane stood still for a moment, then went to Jillian's side. My father's face broke, but he nodded. "Then I'm done," he said. He picked up his coat, looked at me, and added, "I'll make this right, Alara. I promise." And with that, he walked out, leaving his ring and our old life on the table. My father's confession at the birthday party was only the beginning. The next morning, he called me and asked to meet for breakfast. His voice was calm but heavy, like he had been awake all night thinking. When I arrived, he was already sitting by the window with a folder in front of him. He didn't waste time on small talk. He pushed it toward me and said quietly, "This is everything." I opened it and felt my stomach twist. Inside were papers, photos, and emails, each one telling a piece of a story I had never been allowed to know. The first thing I saw was a copy of my college acceptance letter. I recognized it immediately, the same one I thought I had never received. My dream had been to study design at a school I'd worked so hard to get into. I thought I wasn't good enough when the letter never came. But there it was, proof that I had been accepted. My father explained that Jillian had found it first, hidden it, and later convinced everyone that I hadn't been accepted at all. The next few pages were printed emails. I read messages she had sent under fake names to my old friends, spreading lies that I was jealous of them, that I talked behind their backs, that I had stolen money from a mutual friend. I remembered how suddenly people stopped talking to me years ago, how invitations stopped coming. At the time, I blamed myself. Reading those messages now, I felt something inside me break and rebuild all at once. Then I found a pawn shop receipt. It was for my grandmother's ring, the one my mother claimed I had stolen years ago. I had cried for weeks back then, trying to prove my innocence. Jillian had pawned it for cash and blamed me when it went missing. My father had quietly tracked it down later, but said nothing to keep the peace in the family. Now he finally admitted it. "I knew parts of the truth for years," he said, his voice shaking. "I thought if I stayed quiet, things would calm down. I was wrong. I let her destroy you." I didn't know what to say. There was anger, yes, but also exhaustion. So much of my life, my confidence, my friendships, even my dreams, had been shaped by lies. My father reached across the table, his eyes full of regret. I can't fix what I allowed, but I can make sure it never happens again. For the first time, I believed him. My phone buzzed with a message from my mother. We're still family, she wrote. Please don't divide us over misunderstandings. I stared at her words, realizing she still refused to see the truth. It wasn't a misunderstanding. It was betrayal, deliberate and cruel. I put the phone down without replying. As I walked out of that cafe, folder in hand, the air felt different. It wasn't just anger driving me anymore. It was clarity. I finally saw the pattern, the manipulation, and the people who chose silence over justice. My father had given me proof, but more importantly, he had given me back my story. For the first time in years, I knew exactly who I was, and who I would never let hurt me again. My sister stole my dream of becoming a designer. At 30, with a daughter to raise, most people would have told me to let it go. But after learning how much she had taken from me, I couldn't live another day pretending that dream was gone. My father's support gave me the push I needed. I decided the best revenge wasn't to argue or get angry. It was to rebuild everything she tried to destroy and take back the life I was meant to have. That night, after putting Harper to bed, I sat at my small kitchen table with my laptop. The house was quiet, except for the sound of the clock ticking. I searched for the design school I'd once been accepted to. Seeing the name again made my chest tighten. It felt like looking at a ghost of the person I could have been. The application form stared back at me, full of questions that made me doubt myself. I hadn't studied in years. I had bills, a job, and a little girl who needed me. But I also had something stronger, determination. For the next few days, I worked on my portfolio after Harper went to sleep. I sketched, painted, and even dug out some old projects I'd hidden away years ago. Every drawing reminded me why I loved creating things. I had let guilt and disappointment hold me back for too long. My father stopped by often, bringing me coffee and gentle encouragement. He didn't lecture me or try to take control. He just reminded me that I still had time to make something of my talent. One evening, he handed me an envelope. Inside was a bank statement for a new account he'd opened, an education fund for me and Harper. He told me he had moved money that my mother used to manage. This time, I'm investing in something real, he said softly. I didn't cry, but I felt something shift inside me. For years, he'd stayed silent while I struggled. Now he was finally standing beside me, not as a distant father, but as someone who truly saw me. The day I clicked submit on my school application, I felt both nervous and proud. I didn't know if I'd be accepted, but just applying felt like victory. For once, I was choosing myself. I stopped caring about what others might say about my age or my responsibilities. I was tired of letting fear make my decisions. Harper deserved a mother who chased her dreams instead of running from them. Weeks later, when the acceptance email arrived, I sat on the floor with Harper and hugged her tightly. "Mommy's going back to school," I told her, and she clapped like it was her own achievement. In that moment, I realized revenge didn't always have to be loud or cruel. Sometimes it was quiet, a single decision to rise again after being torn down. And that choice, simple as it was, became the start of a brand new life for both of us. My mother showed up at my door, not to apologize, but to bargain. "She's your sister," she said, her voice trembling as if that alone should erase everything that had happened. For the first time, I didn't feel small in front of her. I didn't cry or beg her to understand me. I simply stood there and said the words I had kept buried for years. "And I am your daughter. You made your choice. Now live with it." It had been months since the truth came out. I was rebuilding my life slowly, focusing on school, work, and Harper. Therapy had helped me understand the patterns I had lived under all my life. How I was always told to be the one who forgave, who kept the peace, who stayed quiet to avoid upsetting my sister. My mother had mastered making me feel guilty for wanting distance. But this time, I wasn't falling into her trap. She stepped into my living room, her eyes scanning the space like she was searching for cracks in my resolve. "You can't just cut us off," she said. "Families fight, but they heal. Jillian has been through a lot too." Her words made me tighten my grip on the edge of the table. That same excuse, Jillian's pain, had been used to erase mine since childhood. "Mom," I said firmly, "this isn't about a fight. It's about years of lies and damage. You let her hurt me again and again, and you always defended her. I can't do that anymore." She sighed and sat down, pretending to be calm. "You've changed," she said, her tone almost accusing. "You used to be softer." I smiled sadly. "No, I've finally learned to stop being everyone's target. She tried to reach for my hand, tears forming in her eyes. I'm just asking you to talk to your sister. She's getting help now. I shook my head. If you really want things to change, then you need to face the truth too. Admit what she did. Admit how you looked away. For a long moment, she said nothing. I told her I wasn't cutting her out forever, but I needed boundaries. I said if she wanted a relationship with me or Harper, she'd have to start therapy on her own and stop defending Jillian. Until then, I couldn't allow her in our lives. It wasn't about punishment. It was about protecting myself and my child. Her expression hardened. So that's it? You're giving me an ultimatum? She asked. No, I replied softly. I'm giving myself peace. She left without another word. When the door closed, I expected to feel guilty, but I didn't. The silence that followed wasn't cold, it was clean. For once, I wasn't the broken one trying to fix what others refused to face. I was finally in control of my own life, and I wasn't going to let anyone, not even my mother, take that from me again. A year after the birthday party that changed everything, Harper asked if this time she could celebrate without family, just her friends, some cake, and fun games. I understood completely. She didn't say it out loud, but we both remembered what happened the last time. I wanted this year to be different, peaceful, and safe. No drama, no arguments, just her laughter filling the house. We decorated the living room with colorful streamers and balloons. I baked her favorite chocolate cake, and she helped me frost it, her little fingers covered in icing. For the first time in a long while, I felt light. Life had started to settle into something steady. I was studying, working part-time, and learning to live without the constant noise of family chaos. A few days before her birthday, my father called. His voice was gentle, but I could sense hesitation. I know Harper wants her own party, he said. But could I take her out for a little while? Just the two of us. I paused. The memories of the last birthday still lingered, but I trusted him. He had kept every promise he made since that day. So I agreed. On the morning of her birthday, he arrived early, holding a small box wrapped in plain brown paper. Harper ran to him, smiling wide. "Grandpa," she shouted, hugging his legs. He took her to the park where he used to take me as a child. They spent hours feeding ducks and talking, while I stayed home finishing the setup for her small party later. When they returned, Harper was glowing. She ran inside, clutching the little box he had given her. "Mommy, look," she said, opening it to reveal a simple silver locket. Inside were the words engraved. "You are enough." Her eyes sparkled as she showed it off, and I saw the meaning behind the gift. My father wasn't just giving her jewelry. He was giving her something no one in our family ever gave me. Affirmation. That small locket was his quiet way of breaking a generational pattern. He couldn't change the past, but he was determined to start something new for her. I watched them together that day. Harper wearing her locket proudly, and my father watching her with pride and love. And I realized he was trying to build a different legacy, one built on care instead of control. Later that afternoon, Harper's friends arrived. They played games, ate cake, and danced in the living room. There were no tears, no shouting, no tension. Just children being happy. When the party ended, Harper climbed onto my lap, sleepy but smiling. "This was my best birthday ever," she whispered before falling asleep. As I carried her to bed, I looked around at the quiet, peaceful home I had built. This was my revenge, not in anger or confrontation, but in creating a life where my daughter could grow up loved and safe. I finally understood that healing wasn't about erasing the past. It was about giving the next generation something better to remember. 6 months into my design program, I came home to find a letter on my doorstep. My name was written in Jillian's familiar handwriting. For a long moment, I just stared at it, feeling my stomach tighten. I hadn't heard from her since the day everything fell apart. I told myself not to open it, but curiosity got the better of me. Inside were 5 long pages filled with smudged ink and words that looked like they were written in a rush. She started by saying she was sorry for everything. She wrote about being in therapy, about learning to take responsibility and heal her inner child. The letter was full of phrases that sounded practiced, as if pulled straight from a self-help book. Still, a small part of me, the part that once wished for a real sister, felt something stir. Maybe she really had changed. Maybe she was finally ready to understand what she'd done. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept rereading her words, searching for sincerity. My therapist had told me not to respond right away if she ever reached out. So I brought the letter to my next session. My therapist read it quietly, then asked, "What do you feel when you read this?" I told her I wasn't sure. There were moments that sounded honest, but others felt strange, like she was trying to make me feel sorry for her. We went through it line by line. The deeper we looked, the clearer it became. Every paragraph shifted the focus back to her pain. She wrote about how hard her life had been, how lonely she felt since our parents stopped defending her, how her mistakes came from trauma. It wasn't really about what she did to me. It was about how much she was supposedly suffering because of it. Even her apology had strings attached, like she wanted me to comfort her for hurting me. By the end of the session, I realized what had been hiding under all those pretty words: manipulation. Not the loud, cruel kind I grew up with, but the quiet, guilt-laced kind that made me question myself. It wasn't a letter of healing. It was a test to see if she still had control over me. For a few days, I left the letter on my kitchen counter. Every time I passed it, I felt less pulled by it. The confusion faded, replaced by clarity. I didn't know her forgiveness, not yet, maybe not ever. Some doors, once closed, shouldn't be reopened just because someone knocks softly. Eventually, I sat down and wrote a short reply. It wasn't angry or emotional. I simply wrote, "I wish you well in your recovery. I'm focusing on my own life now." That was it. No details, no warmth, no invitation for more contact. I sealed the envelope and mailed it without hesitation. When I dropped it in the box, I felt lighter. For the first time, I wasn't reacting from pain or guilt. I was responding from strength. Jillian had always thrived on my attention, my need to fix things. But this time, I gave her nothing to feed on. Silence became my final answer, and that quiet truth was more powerful than any confrontation could ever be. When I got my first freelance design job with a well-known local firm, it felt like all my hard work was finally paying off. It wasn't just a project, it was proof that I could build a new future on my own terms. On my first day, I walked into the office nervous but proud, holding my portfolio close like it was armor. The manager greeted me politely, but then his tone shifted. "Can we talk for a minute?" he asked. My heart sank before I even knew why. He led me into his office and said quietly, "We heard some things about you. I just want to make sure everything's okay." My mind went blank. I knew immediately who was behind it. Jillian. My sister had found another way to reach me, and this time she was attacking what I loved most, my career. After I left her letter unanswered months earlier, she must have realized I wasn't going to play her emotional games anymore. So, she found another way to get under my skin. The manager didn't go into detail, but the damage was clear. Someone had told him I was unreliable, that I had emotional problems, that working with me could be difficult. It was all vague enough to sound believable, but poisonous enough to create doubt. I took a deep breath and calmly opened my portfolio. "I understand," I told him. "Here's my recent work, my references, and feedback from my previous clients." I showed him every project, every recommendation, every piece of proof that spoke louder than gossip ever could. My work was clean, professional, and consistent, something no rumor could erase. After our meeting, I called my dad. When he heard what happened, he was furious but not surprised. "She's desperate," he said. "But this time we'll handle it the right way." He offered to speak with the firm's director as a personal reference. Warren had built a solid reputation in the community, and his word carried weight. He explained my history, how I had rebuilt my life, and that someone from my past was trying to damage it. The company decided to move forward with me. They told me they'd seen similar situations before and respected how I handled myself, with composure and honesty. I didn't cry or beg. I let my work and professionalism speak for themselves. That day, I learned that silence and preparation were stronger weapons than anger. Jillian's attempt had failed, but what she really did was give me an unexpected gift. Her lies forced me to see how much I'd grown. In the past, I might have broken down or tried to defend myself endlessly. Now, I didn't have to prove my worth to her, or anyone. I already knew it. As I left the office that evening, I felt stronger than ever. The same woman who once doubted she could start over was now building a name for herself from scratch. Jillian's poison couldn't touch what I had earned through truth and persistence. For the first time in years, I realized she no longer had any real power over me. When my father called me to meet him at his lawyer's office, I didn't know what to expect. His voice was calm but serious. "It's time to make things right, once and for all," he said. I thought maybe it was about another family conversation or an apology I didn't need anymore. But it was something much bigger, something that would change everything for good. When I arrived, the lawyer handed me a folder. Inside was my father's new will. He had made a bold decision that showed how deeply he meant to correct the past. Everything he owned, his savings, investments, even the house I grew up in, was now placed into a protected trust for me and Harper. Jillian was completely disinherited. Diane, my mother, was left only a small allowance under supervision because, as he wrote, she cannot manage money without enabling destructive behavior. Reading those words made my chest tighten. It wasn't about money, it was about finally being seen. For years, my father had stayed silent, allowing chaos to rule our family. Now, this legal act was his way of taking back control. He was ensuring that Harper and I would have stability no matter what happened next. When my mother found out, she lost all composure. She stormed into my home, her face red with anger. "How could he do this?" she yelled. "I've stood by him through everything. And you, this is your fault." I stood there, calm but firm. "He made his choice, Mom. Just like you made yours." She shouted that I had turned him against her, but deep down, we both knew that wasn't true. My father had simply opened his eyes after years of denial. Later that night, she called again, her tone shifting from rage to pleading. "He's sick, Alara. You need to talk to him. He's confused." I listened quietly but didn't answer. I'd heard this tactic all my life, guilt wrapped as concern. But the papers were signed, witnessed, and legally sealed. There was no more room for manipulation or emotional bargaining. The decision was final. When I met my father again the next day, he looked lighter, almost relieved. "This isn't about punishment," he said softly. "It's about balance. I spent too long watching wrong win. I don't have much time left, but I want to leave knowing you and Harper are protected." I didn't cry, though I wanted to. Instead, I thanked him and told him he had already given us something more important than money: peace of mind. The change in his will marked the end of our family's false unity. The mask my mother had worn for decades cracked completely. There were no more family dinners or forced holidays. What remained was truth and distance, the only things that could finally bring healing. For me, it wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about closure. The same man who once stood silent when I was wrong now stood up for me in the one way that mattered most, through action. And for the first time, the future felt secure, not because someone gave it to me, but because I had earned it, and he finally recognized that. The morning of my graduation felt like a dream I had waited my whole life to live. The sun was warm, the sky clear, and my daughter's small hand rested in mine as we walked toward the auditorium. Harper looked up at me with a smile that melted every worry I ever had. "I'm proud of you, Mommy," she said softly. Her words hit me harder than any applause ever could. For the first time in years, I wasn't the woman people pitied. I was someone my daughter could look up to. Inside, I spotted my father sitting in the front row. He looked older but lighter, as if a weight had been lifted from his shoulders. When our eyes met, he gave me a small nod, his face wet with quiet tears. That single gesture said everything. He was proud, he was sorry, and he was here. The sight of him cheering for me meant more than any diploma ever could. When my name was called, I walked across the stage feeling calm and strong. The applause felt distant compared to the sound of Harper clapping wildly. In that moment, I thought of all the nights I stayed up working after she went to bed, all the times I doubted myself, and all the years I lost because of lies. None of it mattered anymore. I had built this moment with my own hands, piece by piece, just like the designs I loved creating. After the ceremony, my classmates surrounded me with congratulations and hugs. They had become more than friends. They were my chosen family, people who had seen me grow without judgment or history. My father joined us, holding a small bouquet of lilies. "These were your mother's favorite," he said quietly, "but I thought today they should be yours." I accepted them with a smile, not out of sadness but understanding. We both knew the meaning behind the gesture. Some things could not be fixed, only released. Later, as I stood outside taking photos with Harper, I noticed something unexpected: peace. Not the loud kind that demands attention, but the quiet kind that fills you from within. Jillian wasn't there. Neither was my mother. And for once, their absence didn't sting. It felt right. Their silence was a reminder that I no longer lived in their shadow. I didn't need them to see me succeed. Their absence was proof that I had finally escaped their control. That evening, Harper and I celebrated with my father and a few close friends. We laughed, ate cake, and took turns trying on my graduation cap. When Harper placed it on her tiny head and said, "I'll go to college too, just like you," my heart swelled. I realized that my victory wasn't just mine. It was hers too. As the night came to an end, I looked at my diploma resting on the table. It wasn't just a piece of paper. It was a symbol of survival, resilience, and freedom. My revenge was never about hurting anyone back. It was about becoming someone they could no longer hurt. And that, more than anything, was the sweetest victory of all. Life had changed completely. I had a career I loved, designing spaces and creating art that people appreciated. Harper was thriving, confident, and happy, surrounded by friends who treated her kindly. Our home was filled with laughter and warmth, the kind of peace I never imagined I could have after years of betrayal and chaos. My relationship with my father had grown stronger than ever. We spent time together not out of obligation, but because we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. He had become a partner in my life, not someone weighed down by past mistakes. We shared meals, discussed my work, and celebrated Harper's achievements, building a bond that was honest and full of trust. Diane was no longer part of our daily lives. She appeared occasionally, never meeting the conditions I had set, and I had learned not to wait for her approval or validation. Jillian was completely absent. I no longer carried anger or hurt toward them because my life had moved beyond their reach. Their absence wasn't painful, it was freedom. One quiet evening, I tucked Harper into bed. She snuggled under the blankets, eyes wide and curious. I told her a story about a brave woman who faced doors slammed in her face, but built her own, strong enough to protect her and those she loved. Harper listened intently, smiling at the idea that courage and determination could shape a life. That night, I realized how far we had come. The life I had built wasn't just for me. It was for her too. Every morning, I woke with purpose and focus, knowing that my past could no longer control me. I spent my days designing, mentoring young creatives, and enjoying the small moments with Harper and my father. Success no longer meant proving anything to Jillian or Diane. It meant living fully and freely, creating joy and stability where once there had been lies and fear. Looking back, I saw that revenge wasn't about hurting anyone. It was about reclaiming myself and building a life so strong that the people who tried to break me couldn't touch it. I had done more than survive. I had flourished. I had built a foundation of love, trust, and strength that no betrayal could shake. That was my victory, quiet and complete, and it was enough. Do you think I did the right thing by cutting them out, or should I have tried forgiving them? I really want to hear your thoughts. If you love stories like mine, subscribe and hit the notification bell for more.